Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. I'm Chuck Mason, and we have a guest with us. Arline Sachs is going to co-host. Arline was one of the founders of the show. And with us today is Pat Stamm from St. Louis. And Pat is the research trip coordinator for the National Genealogical Society. When she comes in to visit, she comes to visit us. So today we're going to talk about books and libraries, but we're going to talk a little bit of a different idea of a library. We're all used to going to the brick and mortar library that we have in our hometown, or in our case, Fairfax County. And there are lots of books in there. The genealogy collections of many of the libraries have family genealogies, but they also have lots of other books that we can use. County histories, I've used city directories, telephone directories, map books, all kinds of things like that. And a lot of times we have in the past had a hard time finding books. For example, I knew that in the Family History Library out in Salt Lake, there was a book on Atlantic County, New Jersey that I could not find in any other library. So when I went to Salt Lake for the first time, that was the first book I went to look for. Today, it's much easier, and Pat's going to tell us, first of all, about WorldCat.
Okay, the great thing about this, and we have the slide that shows WorldCat, okay, and this is on it's a free website. It's called www.worldcat.org, and you put the name of the book or whatever you're looking for down on the in the little file there. And today I put in Newcastle County, Delaware land records. And then the next slide shows us the results. And on the top of it, it will show you the name of the book, and there will be a lot of Newcastle County, Delaware land records. But what will end up happening on that is you select the one you want, it comes up and it tells you the name of the book and when it was published and the publishing information. And then a little bit below that, you can enter your zip code and it will tell you where that book is in relation to where you live. Now, in this one, I used the zip code for this area, and the closest Newcastle County, Delaware land record book is something like 304 miles away from it. But that plays into Chuck's point.
Interlibrary loan, which is available through the Fairfax County Library system. And it's really not, we talked about books, but WorldCat really has lots of other things. It has microfilm, it has microfiche, newspapers, things like that you can borrow. So one of the things I want to point out, you can go, if you're here in Fairfax County, to any Fairfax County public library and order something through WorldCat and borrow it through interlibrary loan, which means the owner of it will send it to the Fairfax County Library. The point I want to make, though, is if you are borrowing microfilm or microfiche, make sure that you have a microfilm or microfiche reader in that particular branch of the library, because I know, I would think they would tell you, but one never knows. But you don't want it to come into a branch and find out they don't have a reader and you can't take it to one. You would have to send it back to the library and have it resent out.
I think the Fairfax Library is the only one that has those readers anymore, because I ran into that a few years ago when I had a microfilm that somebody had brought me from overseas, and I couldn't find any place to read it. And the family church libraries said, no, if you bring it in, they'll keep it. So I had a lot of trouble getting that. But I wanted to mention something about the interlibrary loan that I ran into. I had asked for a very rare book, obviously, because I had found it in the footnote of something else. And they wrote back that they really didn't want to give it to me. What pages did I want? And they Xeroxed those pages and sent those to me. which served my purpose. I didn't need the whole book.
And that's one of the things that ends up happening. It is the library who is sending it out that sets the policy. Sometimes they will charge you a small fee to get it, to send it into your local library. And then sometimes your library may say to you, you can use it as long as you're here at the library. You cannot borrow it outside of the library. So the policies depend upon the originating library as well as the receiving library.
One of the things, I've not used interlibrary loan, but one of the things that people who have used it have told me is the fee is generally covering the postage.
Oh yeah.
Back
It wasn't
and
expensive.
forth. Now, one of the great things about Virginia here is you can borrow things from the Library of Virginia down in Richmond, have them sent interlibrary loan. It doesn't cost a dime.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, you know, the key on this is as you start to go through these and start to look at books, there is so much out there. You mentioned county histories. County histories have a wealth of information, a background information that can help you determine what and when your family came into the area. It can show you the various jobs that were in that area. It could show you the railroad lines or possibly the rivers routes that would go through there. So don't overlook county histories because they do have a fantastic amount of information.
And depending on the county history, some of them are what were called mug books, which is just people who could afford to have their biography and a lot of times their picture put into them and give you a lot of information. Also, I found the county histories where the things you're talking about are there, but there are also prominent citizens' biographies in there. You want to use them with a little bit of discretion because they're not always true. They do enhance or did enhance to make themselves look much, much better, but a lot of great information to take and use on your family members.
And I'm sorry, and don't overlook the fact that these books, a lot of them we talk about are at the turn of the century, but in 1976, as a way to remember the new year for this the U.S. century for 200 years of the U.S. government, they ended up coming up with new mug books as such and county histories. So a lot of the old families put their new stuff in this new one.
Well, what I want to say is you guys are sort of talking about U.S. stuff. I'll stick my nose in for the European ones, but there are a lot of what they call Yusker books, books that were written in the post-World War II, remembering the towns that were disappeared. And they mentioned people, and even before that, there are a lot of books that were written about a particular area which are useful to a genealogist because it'll mention other people, not only the mayor of the town or the head rabbi of the town, but it'll mention, you know, just different people in the town that did something, whatever. So those are really a good source as well. It's the same kind of thing, local history type thing. So they do exist for Europe.
And I have a funny story, okay? Remember that people moved, especially at that time. And one of the things that they ended up doing is a lot of the times they would get rid of those books because they were heavy, they were weighty. So we ended up going into Lawrence, Kansas, which was about 50 miles by way of the crow flies from where the family was. And here comes a library, and I thought, well, I'll just go in and see what I can find. So I ended up going in, and there was a family history that applied to our family. Oh. Now, the key on this is that the family had moved a little bit out of the area, and then they moved a second time. Well, they dumped their books at the library before they left the area. So don't think just because they have to be in this area that you shouldn't check the other libraries around.
And that kind of brings up a point we were talking about before the show. In Fairfax County, the genealogy collection is the room is called the Virginia Room, and people often think that it's only going to be Virginia and Fairfax County, and that's not true, and it's not true of a lot of libraries. The former librarian for the Virginia Room would buy anything she could get her hands on. In fact, she used to joke that people would complain because she was from Michigan and she had so few books, and she'd say, if you write them, I'll buy them, because there just wasn't that much. But it has a large collection. It has other counties in Virginia. It has some DC stuff because part of Virginia was originally part of DC. So don't think that just because it's a county or a city library, you're not going to find something for outside of the area.
Before we move on, I'll say this about the Wisconsin Historical Society, which is a fantastic library. It has 6 floors of genealogical material on all states in the country. And that is where I had my Delaware breakthrough. Not in Delaware, not in DC, but in Wisconsin. So.
And when we were talking before too about the Virginia Room, they have a man there that works, and his former company donates money to any nonprofit organization. So he buys a lot of Jewish history books and Jewish genealogical books, all sorts of things like that. So that, I found the Virginia, I personally haven't found a lot, but I once had a printout of what they had, and it was like 20 pages of single space, really small, so figure 60 lines per page of books that they had. Just the genealogy books.
Now there's another website that we have, and this is called FamilySearch.org. And you guys have talked about this many, many times. But one of the things that ends up happening is they have a collection of books, and they have gone out and started to digitize books across the country. They have the books that they had in Salt Lake, and they're digitizing those. But they also have books from the Mid-Continent Library in Independence, Missouri. In our library in St. Louis, they're sending their books over. A couple of years ago, we found out that the Arizona genealogical collection that was there was going to be closed and not available to researchers. Family Search came up with a contract with them, and they've gone in and started to digitize their books too. So there is a lot of books on there. Now, the one thing you have to remember about this is as you start to search, you need to have a password or a free account to access the books.
Yes. Getting that account gives you access to the books. It is not something that they are going to be emailing you or anything else. It really, really is just a way of being able to know who's going in. And sometimes it's because of the contract that they have with the owners of the books that they require you get into it with a password.
If you find a book, can you then download the PDF? I assume it's PDF format or something like that. You can download it and read it. You don't have to sit there on your computer and read it.
It depends upon the book. Some of them you have to go into a family history center and use it at the family history center, and then save it to your jump drive or your flash drive at that point. Some of them you can do that. And a lot of the times what you will end up seeing is a screen that says you do not have authorized privileges for that. That means that it has to be used at a family history center or the family history library in Salt Lake.
So I guess they don't have permission to put it online.
Right.
Right. It's part of the contract that they have with the owners.
Well, I can imagine that's
books.
particularly true for the newer books. An author's not going to give permission to digitize his books if he can still make money selling it, is my guess.
Yeah. Now, another one that we have is the Google Books. And a lot of people overlook Google Books. But Google is a large company, as you know, and they are out there digitizing a lot of books. Now, part of the problem you run into with Google Books is they have the new books as well as the old books, like you mentioned. The old books, the historic books, for most part, you can download and keep on a PDF, download it to your desk or whatnot, read it, and then get rid of it. But the newer books, you have to purchase or whatnot. And one of the things that I found, besides going into Amazon or whatnot, is a place called Abe's Bookstore. I don't know if you've found it or
No,
not.
I haven't.
This is a really neat website, and one of the things that they end up doing is having books from libraries that they are getting rid of, okay? And a way for them to recoup some of the money is to sell these books at a very, very small price. Now, I'll tell you my funny story on this one is I found a book at the Fort Wayne Library for my Canadian family, all right? And it had all sorts of really great stuff. It had the church that my grandmother went to, it had her family and things like this. So I was thrilled. Fantastic, great book. I went on to Google Books and I found out that there were, it was available. And then I went on to WorldCat and I found there are 2 libraries that had this book. Allen County Public Library, okay, in Independence, or Indiana, and then Salt Lake City. And I thought, well, heck, this is too far apart. So that night I was just doing a search and I found Abe's Books. And they wanted $50 for the book. I couldn't get my credit card out fast enough, okay?
That's a lot cheaper than a trip to Fort Wayne or Salt Lake.
And Amazon had it for $350.
Oh my gosh.
So bottom line is my credit card came out, and by the time I got home from Fort Wayne, there was the book on my shelf, okay?
That's great.
But anyway, Google Books are out there. And again, if you find a book that is not available for you that way, you can always go into WorldCat and see where the book is. It may be very, very close. And don't overlook going to the librarians and saying, you know, ask the librarians questions and saying to them, can you check and see if this is in the index? Now, for the poor librarians, please do not say to them, give me everything you have on the Walls family.
Yes.
I have an interesting story that happened last June. My son had finally located this, I don't want to call it a dissertation, something that was decreed by an old university in Germany about an ancestor in 1712. And my son called me, he said, I found it, it's a Library of Congress, but I'm working, I can't possibly go there. I said, well, you get on the webpage, go ask a librarian, and tell them the exact number. You saw that they had it. When are they going to digitize it? We were in the airport at noon the following day, and all of a sudden he said, they just sent it to me. So they must have digitized it, knowing that somebody was interested in it, and sent it to him. It was, from 1712, so it was, no problem with getting it. But so don't hesitate to ask a librarian.
And that brings up a good point. Ask a librarian, but particularly the Library of Congress. And, we are viewed outside of Northern Virginia here. The Library of Congress's Ask the Librarian system is fantastic. Every one of their reading rooms has that capability. I have a number of times ask a question, they email me what I'm looking for. I wanted to find out something for someone in the manuscript collection, but I wanted to know what I had to do, what hoops I had to jump through before I went down there. So I knew, so I gave them the citation, they pulled it, scanned it, sent it to me. The second time I did it, they went through 10 boxes, the 2 that were cited and 8 others, and said they couldn't find what I was asking for. There were still 64 more boxes that it might be in. So, but it's a great resource, not just for people in this area, but all over the country. You can ask the librarian, and there's a 50-50 chance they'll send you what you're looking for.
Well, years ago I used it, and I had given up. All I did was ask whether they had a map. a couple of hundred years ago. And I was planning to go down there and look at it, and all of a sudden in the mail, I got it in pieces because it was so big they had to take it in pieces. But now, of course, they would digitize it and send it to me. So it's a really great. They're really a great help.
One of the other things with Google Books, and I'm sure maybe some of these others, when you have the books online, they're word searchable.
Yes.
Which is something else that's a great feature, because you could put words in, or you could look for names, places, things like that.
Another website that we have is Internet Archives, and it follows a lot of what you're saying with Google Books. Okay, and the internet, the face of it looks like this, and it's https archives.org. Now, there's a lot of things on this website, and when you do a search, make sure you go in and click the one that says Search Text Options, okay, because you're looking for the books. You can go into the books section and it will pull up stuff, but it will keep track of the books that you have looked at and offer various books available to you. But again, you may see some overlap the same way you do with Google Books, but there are also different books under Internet Archives. I want to finish up with this last one, and that's the next slide that we have. And the next slide is HaitiTrust.org. You guys are so fortunate to be here in the DC area, because the bottom line is Haiti Trust started out as a university collection of books, okay? It started with the University of Michigan, and then it kept on expanding and expanding. So they are out there across the libraries in the universities and digitizing books. Now, for the most part, if you do not have an access card from one of the libraries, you can see a couple of pages, you can see the entry page on the book. But if you have a Library of Congress card, that is one of the access points for this Haiti Trust. And with your Library of Congress card, you have it for 2 years. So it's fantastic for me in St. Louis because I cannot access it through the University of Missouri unless I go up to the university's campus. But with my Library of Congress card, I can access anything right there at my home computer.
And, what are some of the things that they have?
Oh, they have everything that you can imagine. They have government reports. They have, what were you talking about?
The state statutes. One of the things that, when we're doing research, sometimes we have to understand the laws involved. For example, I was trying to prove when my grandmother and where my grandmother was born, because she lied about everything. And one of the things that I wanted to find out was when New Jersey required more than just the place of birth being the state that the person was born in, the mother was born in, or the country. And so what I ended up doing, because I went to the state archives often, I just asked the staff there. They went over, pulled the state statutes out, and I found out even today they do not require anything more than the state if they're born in a state in the United States, or the country if they're born outside of the country. So that answered the question, but with the state statutes for a lot of states being on Haiti Trust, you can go search there. You don't have to worry about contacting the state archives or the state library to find out what the laws are at a particular time for a particular thing that you're trying to investigate.
But even if there's a line that says where you were born, the person filling it out, particularly in a death certificate, it doesn't necessarily fill it out.
Well, this is birth certificates,
But,
so the parties involved are
generally, but
no.
And the key to remember about Haiti Trust is that it's not necessarily genealogical books.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not going to see a lot of family history books on this website, but you are going to see the support material. One of the books that I ended up just recently finding was on military service persons who were killed in World War II. And it would give a little blurb about each one of the individuals alphabetically, and it told who was their next of kin. So the bottom line is, this is fantastic good stuff that you can look for on this website.
Yeah, and as genealogists, we have to realize we have to use other types of books. It's not just the genealogies, it's the other things to help us understand oftentimes why things were done the way they were done, what the law was, and things like that. So we've got just about a minute left, Pat. Is there anything we haven't covered that?
Oh, I'm sure as the technology keeps growing and changing and whatnot, we're going to have new websites available to you. But don't overlook looking at your genealogical society too, because sometimes what they've ended up doing is digitizing some of their old books, okay, and putting them up online. So just go out and kick the tires as such and looking for books.
Well, I know our genealogy society, JGSGW, Jewish Genealogy Society of Greater Washington, has a huge collection just of books that people have donated. We don't normally go out and buy books, or I don't think they do anyway, but it's a lot of really good stuff that people just don't have the room for anymore, and they hang on to it until they give it to someone.
Well, Pat, thank you for coming to visit. We always enjoy when you come in, having you.
Thank you.
Something new.
Thank you. It's always a lot of fun when I come into DC.